Today we're going to be making this sweet frog card, and it is going to be using Sunny Studios Feeling Froggy stamp set and Froggy Friends stamp set from Sunny Studios. And we'll also be using a Lawn Fawn double slider surprise die set. You'll need 2 of the front panels, side panels, 1 of the slider guide, and 2 of the panels for front and back. And you're going to need to cut out the notch in one of the panels on one side and the same panel on the other side, which you'll see in just a moment. We're going to set those pieces off to the side. This is what it looks like when it comes, and you'll have all those extra pieces as well for tabs and things. And I use Bristol Smooth cardstock again to cut out the pieces. You're going to need a 2 3/8 width plastic bag, and that's going to help you with your slider piece. You're also going to need stamp masking paper, and that's by Inkadinkadoo, and some stamping blocks. These are the stamp sets. That's the Feeling Froggy and the Froggy Friends. And then I did use the log and the lily pad from the totally awesome Lawn Fawn stamp set. We're going to start with the front panel on this sweet card. And I went ahead and already stamped out the cat tails. And then in the center, we're going to put this little frog. So I just take him, I put him on my ink, which is the Black Nocturne VersaFine ink. And I just stamp him in the middle. I use my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois to clean off all of my stamps after I stamp with them. And you're going to want to do all of these stamps twice on your masking, and then what you're going to do is cut it out so that way you can mask the frog, and you'll see why that's important here in just a little bit. All right, so there's the mask. So once you have it cut out, you're going to lay it on top of your little frog, because what we're going to want to do is put the ripples in the water. The key here is to make sure that you line it up really well, because if the frog is not lined up well, you will end up with your background ink on your frog, and then when you go to color him, it'll be very tricky. So now what I'm doing is lining up that reflection ripple on the water. And again, I'm going to stamp that one. Now that one I don't need a mask for, so I did not make a mask for that one. And there it is. Now you could, if you wanted to, you could do your water in Blueprint Sketch, and then you could stamp that with the Blueprint Sketch ink, but I chose to use black because I wanted it to stand out a little bit more. Next, I repeat the process with this sweet little dragonfly. And I had already made a mask for the dragonfly, so I'm just going to peel that off the back. And I stick that right on there. Again, make sure you line it up really well. All right, next we're going to take the lily pad, the small lily pad, and we're going to stamp that. And it's off just a little bit, so I stamped it a little bit off of the card panel. You do not want to go down below the fold of this panel. If you go below the fold, then you will not see the lily pad whenever you make the card, the final step of making the card. All right, then we put the mask on again for that lily pad. And then I'm going to drag the dragon tail masks over. Now these are kind of tricky because they're so fine. So you may find that you need to do a little adjusting with these. I just used my tweezers to help guide them onto the appropriate places. And again, you really want to get those lined up well. Now, when you make the mask for these two, you need to make 2, because you have 2 cattails in this picture, and you're actually going to need a total of 3 by the time you finish this card, and you'll see where that's needed. So see how that one little cattail's just kind of not quite right? I had to scoot him over. And then that little leaf ripped off, which was not a big deal. I just stuck it back on there. And I'm using my tweezers to make sure it's just right. Now I just take my Sharpie and I want to make kind of a land. So in the background, I just make some grass type moves and bring it out on the other side of the little frog and on next to the cattails. And I decided it needed a little bit more detail there. So again, I just made some little wiggly marks to make the land and the water distinction. And then we just set that to the side. All right, next we're going to do the little fly. And it's such a little tiny thing. Oh, and I got the wrong one at first. And I just stamp him in a little spot that looked kind of good for a little fly. Next is that little curly Q. Now, actually what I would do is not stamp that until after you do your background. If I were to do this again, I would stamp that after I do the background. Because you'll see it gets a little bit, that line distinction gets a little bit lost when you go to do the background. All right, next what we're going to do is use Salty Ocean, and I pounce it on my mat first, and then I just go in there and do all the background. The top part is the Salty Ocean, and you go right on top of your masks. And what that's going to do is leave your spaces where you need to color white, whereas the background is colored in. And you want that white so that you can color with your watercolors all your images. I'm just going over it, making sure that it's covered really nicely. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do the blueprint sketch on the bottom, and you'll repeat this same process for all 3 of these panels. Now, I'm using my masking to help me hold my paper still while I am inking it. And the reason for this is because if you don't, you're going to end up with fingerprints on the sky area, and you don't want any fingerprints. So again, I'm just inking this all up. Now, we're going to go in with our Gamby. These are, you can get these on Amazon. They're just, they're called Gamby colors. And these are all the silver and gold tones. And then I use a splatter box. This is, a Ranger splatter box, and it keeps all your paints from going everywhere. So I just get the paintbrush really wet and dip it in that gold ink, and there it goes. Splatter it on there. And then I will set that to the side so that it can dry a little bit. Okay, now we're going to work on this next panel, but before we do, we're going to wipe off our space. Okay, we're going to work on the right panel. That is our next panel that we will be working on. So you're going to want to get the 2 frogs that are shown there in the picture, one with the open mouth and the other frog that is jumping. Again, we're going to stamp them onto our card, panel. Now this little frog, you don't want to get him too far to the left of your panel. If you do, when you go to pull that card open, you will not see him. The jumping frog, you want to watch his top left eyeball, not to get it too high up. And I just stamped both those on there. And again, remember, you're going to need a mask for both of those. I've already made them out of my mask paper. The mask paper I use is from Inka Dinka Do, and it's really a great quality masking, and it's just for stamping. All right, so then you lay your little masks on there. And I'm having to use my tweezers because they do like to stick to that plastic. And again, this is really important that you line them up. All right, and I lost his little foot, so I'm going to have to attach that little guy on there. All right, next you're going to want to get the log, and the log is from the Lawn Fawn stamp set. Totally awesome. So we're going to stamp that on top of your masked frog. So this is where it gets a little tricky. You're going to have some layers. So you're going to want to make a mask for that log. I've already done that. So now I'm going to take my mask of my log off, and I place that over top of my frog. And make sure you line it up really good. All right, then you're going to stamp out your cattails. And you're going to stamp them on top of the frog and the log, and on top of your other frog. What this does is it creates where the frogs are in the front and the other items that are in the background are in the back. So you kind of have to think opposite. Whatever you want in the front, you stamp first. And then what you want in the back, you stamp last. Okay, I decided I wanted to go around the edges with Blueprint Sketch just to make it look kind of like it's a nighttime frog scene. So I went around the edges there. And that card had dried by this time. Wipe the space. So I needed the masks for the two cattails, so I had to take them off. But you can see when I took them off, that space where they were is now white. So I can ink that all up. So I'm just carefully taking those off and putting them where they go. Tweezers come in really handy here just to make sure that you have everything in the right place. Next, I'm going to use my permanent marker, and I'm again going to make kind of a little bit of some land in the background for my little cattails and my frog. And I make some little ripple lines. There are some that come in both these stamp sets, little ripple lines, but I decided I could just make them with my marker just as easily. Now we're going to stamp the little fly. And I stamped him where it looked like maybe that frog on the log could be, getting his little tongue out there and getting him. And that he could be, the other frog could be jumping up maybe to go get him. All right, so now we're going to stamp the water. I stamped the water first on this one. The background, so I do that with the blueprint sketch, and I just go right on top of those images because they're all masked. So it doesn't matter if I get a little bit of ink on them. Then I'm going to go to the salty ocean and I'm going to repeat that process. Now we will go back over the little bug, the insect, at the end of this process. Now I'm just going in there and getting all those fine empty details. When you go to do your land, when you get close to your land, you don't have to get it as full of color because we're going to be going in there with our Zig watercolor markers and coloring that in. All right, now we're just going to clean off that space. We're going to get our splatter box back out and we're going to splatter with our Gambi inks. It's the gold one. It's the second from the end. And I just tap my brush on my finger and that's how I get a light splatter. I just use my finger and that's all. Now you might notice there's a pretty good little splatter there next to one of the cat tails. I just pointed it out there. There's not a lot you can do. So I just kind of wiped it with my paper towel and you just hope for the best. That's kind of how splatter paint goes. You just hope for the best every time. All right, now we're going to make this last little panel. It's the one on the left. We're going to get the little frog and stamp that first. Remember, you want to stamp your images in the front first and then go towards the back. And it's a little bit to the right, but not too far because you want that lily pad to still be on there. And I already made a mask, but you're going to get that lily pad. You're going to stamp it next on top of the little frog. And I almost had forgotten to put the mask on the little frog. And I just line that up. And I'm looking at his little feet next to that opening on the lily pad. So I didn't want his little feet to go over that lily pad. Now we're going to stamp the flower. Now on this flower, you guys, I would have scooted it in a little bit more because remember, whatever is on this side where the card pushes in to the center, you're not going to see it if you have it all the way over, so to the right. So I would have stamped that in just a hair bit more, but it still looks cute. All right, then I put the mask on the flower. Next, we're going to stamp the lily pad, and it's the little lily pad. We used it on the front panel. Stamp that guy. I clean him off. All right, we're going to put the mask on the bigger lily pad that the little frog's sitting on. Then we're going to put the mask on the little lily pad. We're going to stamp out our cattails. Now on our example, I drew one and because I only wanted one cattail, but I was like, you know what? We'll just stamp 2 cattails on the side here. So I went ahead and stamped 2, and then you'll need to mask this cattail. so that you can stamp the other one. And this is why you need 3 cattail masks, because you're going to need a mask for each one of those cattails. And I was just pointing out there, it's okay if it didn't stamp totally perfect, just because you're not going to see that part when we open the card. All right, so I'm going to take the cattail off of this guy and stick it over here. And my tweezers are super helpful during this process. And I just give that a good push down. All right, and then you see here, I stamped that guy out, and I'm gonna cut this out. This is on that masking paper. I just move the paper and my scissors stay still. And it goes pretty quick. If you have a really detailed stamp, it might take you a little bit longer, but these stamps are not too detailed. So you just peel the backing off and it's ready to go. And lay that on there. And line up those little cattails. Okay. And we're going to put that little one on there. Okay, and I'm like, oh, nope, I gotta have the land on there first. So we're gonna just make some little wiggle marks to get some water look on there. And I just made it a little bit smooth. Make some little grassy areas, some wiggle marks. All right, now we're ready. So in there with that salty ocean. And then we're going to go in on the bottom with the blueprint sketch. Again, I'm just using my masking paper leftovers to cover that top part so I don't get my fingerprints on it. And a key, again, remember, you don't have to get right up in all the land area because we're going to use our Zig watercolor markers to color that part. All right, and then I'm going to go around the edges with the blueprint sketch. To make it look like it has that little bit of a night sky. Then I noticed the bottom on this one needed just a touch more ink as well. All right, so we go around the edges here. And then next we're going to splatter it up. With our Gamby paints. Now really, Lawn Fawn has a sparkle dust paint, which is really fun to use. And it's already a wet paint. These particular paints that I'm using actually dry very hard. So you have to get quite a bit of water on them before they'll actually be ready to use. And I might have gone a little crazy on this one just because my brush was so wet. But back to the Lawn Fawn Stardust paint. It's really a great tool to use too. The only thing I find about it is the glitter will actually come off on your hands. And I don't know that I want my recipient to have glitter all over their hands. Especially if it is given to a man. I don't know if he would want glitter all over him, but... So I just stick all my masks back on the back side of their little packaging, and that way I can use them again in another project. So I'm just going in, and this is kind of like the big reveal, you know, to see if you did it correctly. So that took the little frog and the log off at the same time. You can also use sticky notes as a masking paper as well. And that one's not quite dry, so I'm not going to take them off of that one yet. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to color these up with our Zig watercolor markers. And I used May green, deep green, green. Those were my main greens I used for the frogs and the lily pads. And then for the cattails, I used olive green and deep brown. And then for the land, I used green and mustard seed. And I just blend it with my water brush. And then I used green. That one's a yellow green. I used yellow green on his little belly and to give him a little bit more bright green color. And I always like to kind of clean off my brushes when I get done, if I am using it on two colors, just because I don't always want them to blend together onto the next color, whatever it might be. All right, that's the mid brown, and that is the olive green. So we're going to use olive green to do the little cattail leaves. And I always like to think about, like, where is the sun hitting those leaves? Is it hitting them from the bottom, or is it hitting them from the top? And if it's hitting them from the top, then that part's white. And then I go back in with my watercolor tool and brush and just color it up. Now, I don't worry about cleaning off my brush after I've been on brown and go to these green leaves, just because these leaves are a little bit brown anyway, and it just gives them a little more pizzazz. Now, for this lily pad, I actually used the deep green, and I should have just used regular green if I wanted it to look exactly like my other card front panel. So if you like the look of the original card, then you could use green, but I used deep green on this one. So we just went in there with haze blue to do his little wings, and we did yellow and orange for the little body of that dragonfly. All right, here's where I'm using deep brown. And I'm just going around the top edges of these, the little land. Then I'm using mustard. I'm going in the bottom there. And then I changed my mind on this one. I'm like, oh, I think it needs green. So I use my bright green, May green. And then I just use my water brush and blend those two colors together. And that really just makes it pop. All right. And we're going to, and see, I use deep green and I wish I would have used regular green. But it's okay, it still look cute. I just go around all the little spots where he's sitting, and then I blend that out with my water brush. Clean off my brush. Now I'm going to go do this last one. And this last one I used green. And then I just go in there and blend it out. The great thing about watercolor brushes is it doesn't have to be perfect. And it still looks nice. Now I'm adding some little dots. I go back in with my May green right on top, and I'm not going to water them down. I'd leave them just the way they are. Just adds a little character to that little frog. And now I'm going to use cobalt blue, and I'm going to go around any little parts where my mask didn't cover. And that just hides those little white background parts that didn't get covered. And then on the bottom, I'm going to use cornflower blue. All right, and then that panel's done. And we're going to repeat that same process for each of these panels. We just go in there, I use May green, color them up, and All right, so again, we just repeat the same process with the other cards. Once all of your cards are finished, all your panels, you're going to put them in their right order. And you're going to get that plastic bag and you need your guide. On your guide, you're going to use 1/8 inch Sukwang tape. Sukwang is the best tape because you can tear it with your fingers and it really holds. And on these interactive cards, you really want tape that is going to hold really well. So you're going to put that on the top and bottom of both sides of your guide, of your slider guide. And you're going to burnish that with your burnish tool. Now I have to add a little bit on the end because I didn't have quite enough there. Now what we're going to do is we need to ink this back panel. So we're going to ink it all with Salty Ocean, and we're going to leave the middle not as inky. And I just use that guide because you're not going to see it anyways. So we get the middle, we get all the parts. Then we're going to go around the edges. Well, I folded this first. And then you're going to go around the edges with your chipped sapphire. If only inking went this fast. And then I just blend it again with my other blender brush. Okay, clean off our space. All right, now we're going to put the little saying, "You're totally awesome." And that's from the Sunny Studios Froggy Friends stamp set. And I like this stamp block because it has lines on it where you can line the words up. Now this is important that your top is where your fold is. I give that ink just a moment to dry before I lay it down. Okay, now you're going to take your plastic bag, and I trimmed mine because it had a hole in it, and you're going to want to line it up right along with the top and bottom edge of your guide. You're going to put a piece of that Sukwang 1/8 inch tape on the left side. Then you're going to peel that tape off and be careful not to stick it to itself because it wants to do that. And you could just fold that over if you had a nice straight edge, but I don't. So I decided I'm going to trim that little weird edge off with my scissors. Okay, then fold that right over. Now don't get it too tight, because if you get it too tight, then it's not going to want to move. And you want it to move because that's the whole purpose and way you make your slider go. Okay, and you want your tape back on the front on the left side. Now on the right side of that piece of tape that you had just laid down, make sure it doesn't go over the edge or again your piece won't move. You're going to lay another 1/8 inch piece of tape down. And then you're going to do this on the back side on the opposite edge. So I literally flipped it over like calendar style, and put that other piece down. Now you're going to peel that off and put your right panel, you're going to line it up with the edge of your guide, top and bottom. Then you're going to flip your card over calendar style. You're going to take that off, your tape off. And I had to look at it a couple times just to make sure that I was doing it right. Okay, and you're going to line that up with the left edge guide. Okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to maneuver the mechanism a couple times just to make sure that it works. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold the front panel bottom. And I use my bone folder tool to make it nice and crisp. You're going to line that top edge up with the top edge of that fold right in the crease. But don't get it too tight, or then again, your mechanism may not work. All right, and then you're going to repeat the same process. You're going to use the bottom, do that on the bottom. And I remembered you got to put tape on the inside of your folded panel. And again, that is your guide for your card, for those pieces to run along. All right, so now again, I had forgotten, you have to put a piece of tape along that top edge of that fold and get it up above on the line up above. Because if you don't, then again, your piece will not move, and you want those pieces inside to move. All right, and there it is. Our sweet little card. And the first couple times you move it in and out, it might be a little stiff. But once you've done it a couple times with the same card, it loosens up. There we go, and now we can compare. So cute. There it is, our sweet little card.